The newly independent United States used Greek Revival architecture as a symbolic affirmation of ancient Greece with its quest for independence and its vital role in the creation of democracy. As many people in Madison grew prosperous, architects displayed that wealth and prominence with such stunning accomplishments as the Lanier Mansion and nearby Shrewsbury House. Today, these buildings stand as monuments to historic preservation.
Well, I think the architecture is kind of a very natural reflection of the growth and decline of a community because it's so integrally related to the economics of the community. As people became wealthy through the industry that was growing here, they wanted to display that in having nice homes to live in. And so you have wonderful residential architecture here from the first half of the 19th century.
From the time that Madison was founded, it grew in spurts for the first couple of decades, I guess, especially the 1830s and 1840s. That's the period when real estate values were escalating, the population was increasing rapidly. So the building boom didn't really start overnight, in my view. It was just something that grew incrementally.
The architecture was a symbol of economic growth, of the prosperity, of the optimism of the time, and the feeling that things were continually going to get better here in the United States.
As the years went by, some of the buildings sat forlorn and empty. Some of the buildings stayed on. But by 1937, the Great Flood of 1937 came along, and it took its toll on our riverfront and our industry.
In 1937, the flood came along and basically washed out everything in the downtown area. Our waterfront had a number of factories and mills, but they had been in a very long-term decline. After 1937, none of it came back. None of it was rebuilt. It was the coup de grace, so to speak. The 1937 flood washed away virtually every economic and manufacturing activity in the downtown area, and it simply was not rebuilt after the flood's waters went down.
The flood took out so many of the old commercial buildings and factories. They were so damaged and destroyed during this flood. The water stayed up a long period of time. In a way, maybe it was a good way of saying it's time to move on to a different economic base. Unfortunately, it was very devastating economically and emotionally to so many people up and down the river valley.
The Madison Lumber Company and the new independent tobacco warehouse have opened temporary offices in the warehouse of the Sulzer Crude Drug Company at 2nd and West Streets.
The river gauge at 1 p.m. today at Madison was 72.8 feet, a rise of 1 inch since this morning at 8 o'clock.
The Madison Chamber of Commerce rooms at the City Hall have been turned over to the Red Cross for headquarters of that agency during the flood emergency.
Milk dealers today requested all persons having milk bottles in their possession to turn them into groceries or other places selling milk. They are unable to purchase any at the present time, and the city faces a shortage of bottles.
Over 300 families have been forced from their homes in Madison.
44 inches of water was in the basement at the Graham Spoke Factory this morning at 10 o'clock, and the arch of the culvert over Crooked Creek at that point was about 1 inch above the water.
All families living west of Broadway in the Crooked Creek section of the city have been evacuated.
The backwater has forced Crooked Creek past Broadway and 5th Streets, and the water is several feet deep in the Valley City Transfer Building and the Noble Dry Cleaning Plant.
The slight fall in the river caused but little change in the appearance of the flooded sectors of the city. From points on the hills, Madison resembled a huge peninsula, nearly entirely surrounded by water.